Good morning, Eagle Nation. We are here today to bring you our first series of a brand new Lunch and Learn. We are excited to kick off the legislative session that's going on at the state of Texas. And our CFO here, Ms. Liz Stewart, and myself will be taking you through a series of Lunch and Learns this spring. And today's our first one, so we're going to get started with you. All right, so the Texas legislature is in its 89th session, and so we want to give you just a quick background for those of you that may not be too familiar with how that works in the state of Texas. We have a lot of new families that have moved here from out of state, and so we want to make sure that they are getting the same background knowledge. But the Texas legislature meets every 2 years, so we are in that odd year of where they're kicking off in 2025. This is the 89th Texas legislature. It will run for 140 days from January 14th to June 2nd, and so that is what they call the regular session. Special sessions are always a possibility at the conclusion of the regular session, should there need to be additional sessions, and they did start last week. The 88th state legislative session kicked off in 2023, so 2 years ago exactly, and that particular session had 4 additional special sessions after that regular session concluded. So again, there's a possibility for additional special sessions even after this one concludes in June. The Texas Senate has 31 members, and our Texas House has 150 members. Now, to talk a little bit about who represents Argyle ISD, because that's a very important part of all of this process. In the Texas Senate, we have Senator Tan Parker in District 12. Senator Parker serves 100% of Argyle ISD, along with several other districts and communities, but he does cover all of our district. And then we are unique in a situation. We have 4 different state House representatives. We have Representative Richard Hayes serving District 57. Representative Hayes is now serving in his second legislative session, and he has kind of the mid-Denton County area, parts of Denton and Argyle, serving 39% of our district. We also have Representative Ben Bumgarner, District 63. Now, as Representative Bumgarner has a very small portion of Argyle ISD, but he does have 1% of this district, and that is the southern portion of Denton County, including Flower Mound. Representative Andy Hopper is new to the state legislature, District 64, and Representative Hopper is Wise County in the northwest section of Denton County. He has about 13% of our school district covered. And then finally, we have Representative Mitch Little, District 65, also newly elected, and Representative Little is 48% of Argyle ISD. He has kind of a swath from the far west and central Denton County to from the Justin North Lake, and then over to Bartonville and Argyle to the east central Denton County area. So we're very fortunate to have a great variety of representation for us, and want to just start out by saying we have already had great connections and partnerships with these legislators as they are preparing to go into session. In September, we had actually an in-person meeting with Representative Mitch Little. We had some trustees that were able to join us, and then also some of our district staff. Then in October of 2024, Richard Hayes came and met with us in person. We actually went over our newly adopted legislative priorities that the board had adopted, so we appreciate him coming into district for that meeting. And then just recently, as recent as this week, we had a virtual meeting with Representative Hopper, and we walked through kind of our legislative priorities. He had the opportunity to ask questions about our teachers and some of the things and challenges that they are facing this year. And so that was a great conversation, and we really appreciate the collaboration with our representatives as they're headed down there. And then we've also had phone calls with Representative Hayes this week again, and then Senator Tan Parker's staff as recent as yesterday. So they're very interested in the impact things are having on school districts, and they continue to stay in contact with us, and we really appreciate that. And then we will be having a day at the Capitol in February, and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. And we have meetings set up with our representatives, as well as State Representative Brad Buckley. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Stewart for just a moment to kind of do a recap on how the M&O side of the budget in school districts, how that works. Ms. Stewart?
Yes, thank you. So just a reminder, we like to try and always get out this piece of education to everyone in our district. So as you see, your local property taxes rise, whether that's in an increase in your appraisal or new homes coming on, new businesses coming on. The way the state funding formula is set up is as our local share increases, the state share decreases. So just because individuals may be paying more on their M&O side does not necessarily mean that the district is getting more. Our funding is set by the state funding formula, and that's on the number of students, how often they show up, and the characteristics of those students.
All right, thank you very much. And if you have questions or comments throughout this YouTube Live, please put those in the chat, and we will work to answer those during the live stream or potentially later on after we get done. So please, if you have questions, make sure you add those into the chat. So let's talk a little bit about the 88th legislature. So that was the one that kicked off in January of 2023. And we want to talk a little bit about where we've been with that. So that session ended with property tax relief for homeowners that resulted in an 18.5% decrease in Argyle ISD and our M&O tax rate. It also ended with some additional funding for the new school safety requirements that were in House Bill 3. And it also ended with an increase in the homestead exemption to $100,000, which was up from, I believe, $40,000?
That's correct.
Okay, so up from the $40,000. So those are some key things when you think about school funding and communities that the session ended with specifically. And remember, this session ended and had 4 additional special sessions throughout that ended up going into the fall of 23 there. So we were finishing that up even into the school year last year. Some other things that have happened in that legislative session and that it ended without. So we talked about what it ended with, but what it ended without was any increase to the basic allotment. I'm going to ask Ms. Stewart to talk a little bit about what basic allotment is.
Sure. So again, I'm going to reference the state funding formula. So the state funding formula sets a basic allotment or amount per student that each district is funded on. So if a student were to show up to school and have 100% attendance, then they would, the district would receive the full basic allotment for that student. And then there's also some special characteristics, special ed, ESL, GT, things like that, that could increase and add weights to those basic allotments. But the basic allotment is the base to our funding formula.
Okay, thank you. And so again, in thinking about that basic allotment, we haven't had an increase. Public school districts in Texas have not had an increase to that since 2019. And we all know a lot has happened with inflation since 2019. So despite the 4 additional special sessions, we were not able to get anything out of the 88th legislature with the basic allotment. Additionally, that session ended without adjusting the basic allotment, as I mentioned, for the cost of inflation. It also ended without designating any money for teacher pay raises or additional staff pay raises. And that session also ended without fully funding the new safety and security requirements for every campus. There was some funding for that, but it did not fully fund that, and so that was an underfunded mandate with House Bill 3, where all campuses had safety officers on campus. The other thing is it ended without adjusting weighted funding for special populations. Special populations being special education, dyslexia, gifted and talented, ESL, and populations of our students in those categories. As far as the impact on the budgets, I'm going to let Ms. Stewart visit a little bit about that as our CFO.
Thank you. So in working through the 24-25 budget, which is this fiscal year that we're in, we started that process last year, and all districts across the state were left to deal with the potential funding cuts. We were still at the same level since 2019, and so we were looking at cuts to staffing programs, and some districts were even looking at closing campuses. For Argyle ISD specifically, we are a fast growth district. We faced about a $4.5 million budget deficit going into the year, and that was basically due to the expiring of the formula transition grant and then no increase to the basic allotment and rising costs due to the inflation. So our district was unique in that there were about 100 schools in Texas back in 2019 when we had the last adjustment to the funding formula. We saw the need, or the state saw the need for the formula transition grant. And that was due to the funding formula adjustments then did not actually show an increase to every district in the state that was intended. So they brought in this formula transition grant and said that it would be funded for 5 years. That expired last year, so our district actually went back to previous funding prior to 2019. The inflationary increases that we saw from 2019 to 2024, our utilities have increased by about 51%, fuel by about 44%, and insurance has increased, property insurance has increased by about 45%. We have several underfunded mandates from the state. As we mentioned, special populations have weighted funding. Specifically, if you look at our special education, we spend 151% more than what the state allots for special education. And when we look at that, we ask for the state to actually fund fully all of our special populations. We also are projected to spend about 483% more than allotted for the school's safety requirements in House Bill 3. And that is a pretty big impact on our budget in all areas.
Would you talk a little bit about the school safety requirements? They require an officer on every campus, but Argyle ISD has been doing that for several years, along with, for several years has already funded that.
That's correct. So our board decided back several years ago to form our own police department, and they felt that it was important that every campus have a police officer on that campus, and so we have been doing that for several years and have chose to fund that locally. This year, the state, or I guess in the last legislative session, the state said that that's what every district should have. So we were already there, and we were already doing that. But if you look at the amount that they included in the school safety compared to what it costs us to run that, that's where you get the 483% more than what's allotted.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. All right, so when you're talking about us being a fast growth district, let's talk a little bit about really what we did last year, Ms. Stewart, in terms of preparing for this upcoming budget, knowing what we were using as far as the funding formula.
Sure. So we were looking at funding the district based on current law, and we started early. Typically, we don't have board or workshops until later in the year. We would do them in typically May and June. But we knew that this was going to be a difficult budget series, so we started in February with some board workshops and had one every month through June. We went through and established a committee internally with some of our district admin to help try and reduce the deficit. We did take our deficit from $4.5 million to $400,000, and we did that by eliminating certain categories of support staff. That was all across the district and in every category of support staff, including on our auxiliary staff. We did reduction of departmental and campus budgets. We went to a zero-based budgeting for departmental budgets. And then we looked at campus budgets, and we did, for the first time, we did a 10% reduction in the allotment and a 10% contingency. That 10% contingency is something that a lot of districts in the state typically do every year and hold that back and then see how the year goes. But Argyle ISD had not done that before, but we did implement that this year. We also did a reduced compensation plan, meaning that typically in the past, we've been able to give a % raise to staff. This year, the board approved in June, they approved a one-time payment plan for our staff, and that was to be divided into two payments, one in October and one in March. And then we looked at class size increases at the secondary school levels. So we didn't go above, or we didn't intend to go above the standard at secondary schools, but when we were looking at that and working through, I believe we used Moat Casey to help work us through a study on that, we were a little bit lower than what the standards were. We did choose to keep our elementary classes at a 22-to-1. And as with any growing district, as you grow throughout the year, we try and maintain that, but that's a constant moving target. You may have 23 come in, and then you try and add a teacher in sections, and we've done that through the year. And then we increased fees and did some different things to try and increase our revenue on the revenue side.
So back in October, one of the things that we worked through with our board of trustees was to set up a set of legislative priorities, if you will, that were important for Argyle ISD, knowing what we were facing, our unique challenges, and then the expectations of our community. And so our board of trustees adopted their legislative priorities, and we have that on a dedicated webpage we're going to move to and show you right now. You can go through there and spend some time seeing that. It's under Argyle ISD legislative priorities, and you'll see some content in there, but you'll more importantly, you'll see kind of the 5 areas that we have been talking to our legislators about, our senators and our state reps. So we talked a little bit about the basic allotment and needing that increase, teacher and staff compensation, identifying the true cost of educating all students, and that's where we talk about our special population students, our students with special education, dyslexia, those special services. that's definitely underfunded, increasing additional funding for special education, and then eliminating recapture on voter-approved Tier 2 copper pennies. And so that's another piece to the funding formula, that on those Tier 2 pennies that districts like Argyle have to pay back to the state on that recapture piece. So we have that available for all of our community and anyone that would like to see those priorities. And then our representatives have also been given those and talked through those with us at length. All right, so where we are, this current legislative session, we talked a little bit about that it has kicked off already, and that is true. It's very early in the session, as you know. We are still in January. They are just kind of getting acclimated. They're in the process of starting to put bills on the floor. They're just set their budgets as recent as this week. On Wednesday, both the House and Senate released their proposed budgets, which are SB1 and HB1 for 26 and 27. These are biennium budgets, so they're for the 2 years. And what we understand is that the House has an extra $4.5 billion more in their proposal. But all in all, the total budgets are over 1,000 pages, and that includes everything. I believe we were told that education is 40-some pages of that. So there's a lot of pages in their budgets that they're going to be sifting through in the future, in the coming weeks and months. So Ms. Stewart's going to talk a little bit. Will you talk a little bit about, as we've talked with our representatives and what we understand from different organizations, what we see in the SB1 and HB1 as far as similarities?
Of course. So again, it's very early on, and so we have some details of both of these bills, but we don't have all of the details of the bills. But what we do know is that both include $6.5 billion in new property tax relief. On the Senate side, they're looking at doing that through a homestead exemption of increasing that by another $40,000. On the House side, they're wanting to do that by compressing the M&O tax rate by additional over 6 pennies to accomplish that $6.5 billion in property tax relief. They've looked at funding school ESAs, which we call vouchers. In the last legislative session, in the 88th legislative session, they proposed $500 million for that. Both the Senate and the House have proposed $1 billion to start those ESAs. And then public school funding for teacher compensation. Both bills have just under $5 billion for that. It's $4.85 billion for teacher compensation. Typically, that includes teachers, counselors, nurses, and librarians. But again, we haven't seen the actual language on that to determine what categories are in there. Both bills have $400 million for school safety. And when we talk about these numbers, remember our state is on a biennium, and so this is for 2 years. So it would be $200 million per year in additional school safety funding. For teacher raises, again, those would be, we're assuming those would be teachers, librarians, nurses, and counselors. There's on the Senate side, they have $4.1 billion for compensation, and they've got that assigned as $4,000 increase to across the board. And then if you're in what's considered a rural district, that would be an additional $6,000, so a total of $10,000. We are still trying to find out the definition of rural. We believe that it's set at 5,000 students, and so that would eliminate Argyle ISD from that rural category, and our teachers would see the 4,000. They have $750 million in the teacher incentive allotment, which at this time does not affect Argyle ISD. And then on the House side, they have $4.85 billion for compensation across the board. They have the 4,000 increase in each of the categories, and then of course the 6,000 additional for those in rural, which we believe does not apply to Argyle ISD at this point in time. What we don't see currently is we don't see any language to increase the basic allotment. And again, that basic allotment has stayed the same since 2019. There is room in that $4.85 billion that they could potentially put an increase to basic allotment, but that's not the language that we see at this point in time. There's no compensation for increase to other district employees outside of teachers, librarians, nurses, and counselors. So any auxiliary employees, any paraprofessionals, teacher aides, and things like that. There's also no costly inflation adjustment, since again, the BA was increased the last time in 2019. And the way it's written, no guarantee of teacher compensation increase beyond this 2-year budget. If that teacher compensation is written into a basic allotment increase, then you do see that beyond the 2 years, but we haven't seen language that takes that beyond the 2 years at this point in time. And then we don't believe that the additional amount for school safety will fully fund all the requirements from House Bill 3 in the 88th legislative session.
So this is where we really need to continue calling on our community, our staff, our parents, everyone that's involved, as part of our Argyle ISD school community. And the ask is for our legislature to use the state surplus of local property tax collections to increase the basic allotment. And really to be commensurate with inflation since 2019, districts really are all kind of in the same position here that needs to be about $1,300 per student increase to be commensurate with what we're seeing across the board in inflation. So we have a big ask but we have our Take Action Argyle that I'm going to ask them to click on here. So we will be sending this out in the coming days, but our Argyle ISD, we have our own branded way to really go out and ask our legislatures for help. If you're good with writing your own, that's great. You have the opportunity to do that. If you struggle with what to write, we have that set up on this website for you. You have the opportunity to email. You have the opportunity to make a phone call. You can put in your information, and this will actually take your messages to your appropriate representative based on your address. And so this will allow you to send an email. It'll allow you to send or make a phone call directly to those numbers. And then again, if you want to enter your own information, there's a kind of a form already put in there under the Dear Official, but you can obviously customize that. You can see the click to customize there. So we'll be sending this out. It is an active website. It's the same one we were using last time, and we've updated the content on that to kind of give where we are as far as a district and where we're going with that and what we really are asking for our legislatures. We will have a day at the Capitol in February on the 26th, and so we're looking forward to that opportunity. Argyle ISD administration will take some of our trustees. We're going to be taking trustees Westrom and trustees Artho down with us, along with some of our staff members, and we have some community members that will be joining us going to the Capitol. And we're very excited to say that every meeting we've asked our legislators to set up with us, they've all confirmed. And so on that day, which will be an early start and a late getting home, but we are going to be able to meet with all of our state reps and then additionally meet with Representative Brad Buckley. He has been the chair for the Education Committee, and so we're going to go ahead and meet with him as well. We're on his calendar. So we're looking forward to those opportunities to sit down with our representatives and continue the conversations and collaborations moving forward to help public schools, and particularly Argyle ISD, but all public schools. And you can follow along. There are a lot of different social media outlets following the legislature. One of the hashtag TextLeg is one of the ones that you can really look at and find a lot of things there. And the Texas Tribune is another resource that we'll be putting out daily updates. They have a lot of great videos. They have some interviews on there, and you can do some research on the Texas Tribune website as well. So really our next steps are for our communications to come soon, and we will be sending out our Take Action Argyle for you to review, so you'll have that handy. We also have it on our website, so please make sure that you are you're looking at the website, looking at those legislative priorities, what that means to you as a family and your child. And then mark your calendars, because we will have another Lunch and Learn YouTube live series in March. We're scheduled for the 21st at 11:30, so it's a different Friday, but at the same time. And at that time, we hope to bring some of our community members and staff members that went with us to Austin in to share their perspectives on that trip. And so hopefully we'll have some more updates. We'll be further along in the session and can share that with you. So at this time, I'm going to ask if we have any questions or anything in there.
What's the best way for a community member or parent to help advocate for the district at the state level?
Okay, so I will speak on that, and then I'll see if Ms. Stewart has anything to add. Definitely reach out to your representatives. Their emails, if you don't want to use Take Action Argyle, you can get to them by emailing them directly on the Texas House and Texas Senate websites. And they have staff watching and receiving their emails, and they are responding. I know we reached out to them via their email accounts earlier this week and had responses to set up our appointments. You can go to Austin, you can go meet with them in person. They are willing to meet with people, and so we just ask that our community and our parents continue. And you have personal stories that you can share with them, things about especially for families who have students in some of these special programs, or you have students in extracurricular programs that you want to make sure that we continue to be able to fully support and fund at the local level. Those are great things for you to share with them, is those personal stories that you have and how things like this are impacting your child in the classroom. So we encourage you to stay connected. Don't hesitate to reach out to them. And if you need help with content and pointers and things to discuss, we're more than happy to do that. And you can reach out to our communications department. Anything else? Okay. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. Do you have anything else you want to share?
I don't, just thank you very much.
Yeah, well, this is our first series. We're looking forward to future ones. And as always, please reach out. We'll be absolutely happy to visit with you. And go Eagles!